Hey there, how you doing? Good to see you. Time for audiobook recording. So I gave this a shot yesterday, and I was really not happy with the results. I wasn't happy with my settings. I wasn't happy with just about anything. So I'm just starting over from the beginning on the prologue. As always, I would like to thank Chiago Abdallah, Josh from Red Fury Books, and Esme Roslin for being fantastic. Thank you very much for making this book far better than it ever could be on its own. So it's time for some artsy fartsy vocal warm ups. What to do to die today at a minute or two to do. A thing distinctly hard to say, but harder still to do. And the dragon will come when he hears the drum, a rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat at a minute or two to two today at a minute or two to two. Our old friend Hot Tea is helping us get down into the lower registers and have a clear inner tone. Let's see if I can tell you a story. Prologue. Battle of the Barrel Strait. Love is but the discovery of ourselves in others and the delight in the recognition. Alexander Smith. No songs were ever sung of the Battle of the Barrel Strait. Only one survivor lived to tell the tale, and he never spoke of it until the day of his execution. It was the winter of the snake, a dismal year for merchants and pirates alike. Unrelenting hailstorms and lightning strike Unrelenting hailstorms and lightning strikes at sea made for dangerous sailing, and commerce ground to a halt. Only one cargo vessel, the Patience Man, was desperate enough to brave the barrel, and only one pirate ship, the Seagull, was mad enough to go after her. The pirates attacked from the north, masked by the frozen waste, cut off the Patience Man and her shore-hugging route. The Seagull harried her for 14 hours, picking off crew and punching holes in her keel with ballista, catapults, and harpoons. The captain of the Patience Man displayed true courage and repelled boarders 6 times before his ship foundered. The captain of the Patience Man displayed true courage and repelled the captain of the Patience Man the captain of the Patience Man displayed true courage and repelled boarders 6 times before his ship foundered. His stalwart crew outmatched, outplayed, and outmanned. All hands were put to the sword. All hands were put to the sword. In relieving the doomed ship of her treasures, the pirates tarried too long and became trapped in the ice. The world heaved beneath the Seagull as storms reshaped the sea. Lightning struck the mast. Shifting icebergs tore the ship apart like grinding rocks. The hull splintered. In the end, both ships struck headfirst into the rocky. In the end, both ships struck headfirst into the rocky bottom of the barrel. Along with the treasures each crew had fought so hard to possess. 40 frightened pirates entered the freezing water and desperately swam for shore as sharks picked them apart. Only one slave boy made it out of the water alive. Pip woke to the stench of corpses. Pip woke to the stench of corpses. One eye had swollen shut, the other blinked at the frozen beach. Littered along the white s- Littered along the white sand were the bodies of his former crew, strewn like mannequins, frozen solid in the surf. Crowsman Bondi lay face up, his head rocking back and forth as waves washed over his open eyes. A pack of gulls worked on Kite, picking out the guts spilling out of his shirt. Grace had made it up a few feet. Grace had made it up a few feet to the shore before she'd bled out. Grace had made it a few feet up to the shore. Grace had made it. Grace had made it a few feet up the shore before she'd bled out. Horseshoe crabs crawled over the shark bite of her missing arm. I'm alone. Pip looked up the shoreline. Corpses littered the beach like driftwood. None moved. Alone. Alone. Pip's, te- Pip's teeth chattered as he stared at the frozen waste around him. Hello? Hello? Nothing. Just the sound of the waves. They're gone. They're all gone. Pip limped across the snow-covered beach. Wrapped around a barrel, fishnets tangled around him, lay his captain. Roper, Jan- Roper John's hands were blue and puffy, his face frozen in a rictus grin. The gold chain around his bloated neck tinked against the barrel. One boot was gone, and his exposed toes looked like fat, sodden mushrooms. Gone. Gone. Pip picked up a hunk. Pip picked up a hunk of wood and prodded the corpse. A sigh of trapped gas escaped the dead pirate's smile, a last foul breath. Pip hit it. Pip hit him with the stick. Again. His blows intensified, striking over and over at the body. Pip didn't realize Pip didn't realize he was screaming until the stick broke. Roper John's corpse still smiled at him. Pip kicked his teeth. Yes! 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 The boy shouted at the top of his lungs, grinning like a wolf. Come on! Come on! Shivering, Pip drew in a long breath. He was trapped at the edge of the world, surrounded by the dead and freezing to death. He had never felt so free. Alone. He had no tinder or flint to make fire, but Roper John had shown him, drunk over cards, how to create flame with the snap of his fingers. It had been a knack of the captain, a cheap bit of magic, but Pip had never learned the trick. Timber and flotsam from both ships littered the shore. Pip gathered it into a pile, stealing coats and shirts from the dead crew, covering himself in layers of wet wool. As he did, he stared at the wood, focusing. I can do this. I can do this. He knelt next to the pile of timber and snapped his fingers. Nothing. He closed his one good eye and drew on the wick of the world. He snapped again, but the magic eluded him. He glared at Roper John's corpse. Couldn't teach me one good trick before you died, could you? Couldn't teach me one good trick before you died, could you? For an hour, Pip hunched in the howling wind, snapping numb fingers, trying to summon. For an hour, Pip hunched in the howling wind, snapping numb fingers, trying to summon the spark. The last embers of the sun faded The last embers of the sun faded as lightning split a frost-cracked horizon. Night fell, as did the temperature, and the cold threatened to reunite Pip with his crew. Sea and sky, help me. Lord, Lord, a sea and sky, help me. One last snap and fire blossomed at his fingertips. The orange glow reflected in his eyes, the only bit of warmth in an empty world. By the time the moons came up over the Iridan, the bonfire was big enough for 20 men. Pip picked up the scraps of his old ship piece by piece and tossed them in. He collected a net, 4 empty barrels, a pair of oars, 6 lengths of rope, 8 sheets of canvas, and 9 wineskins, and built a lean-to that protected it all. Pip popped open the barrel Roper John had been clutching. Inside were two 20-pound hams packed in salt. He grinned. Alone and rich. Alone and rich. Alone and rich. He chucked another piece of the seagull into the flames and danced. Oh, I got a gal who's always rotten, stuffs her shirt with a bale of cotton. 6 foot tall, 6 foot tall, 8 feet of hair. Pulled holes in a barrel for her underwear. Don't know Liza, don't know me. We got a ticket to the jamboree. A mule kicked her, she kicked right back. Made her bed out of an old haystack. Sung last weekend in a bass quartet. You ain't seen nothing like her yet. Don't know Liza, don't know me. We got a ticket to the jamboree. When he woke, the hams were gone. When he woke, the hams were gone. When he woke, the hams were gone. The barrel was open, salt scattered on the ground. The melting snow was scarred with the jagged claw marks of some lupine animal Pip didn't recognize. The melting snow was scarred with the jagged claw marks of some lupine animal Pip didn't recognize. All that remained of the food was one pinky-sized gobbet of pink pig. Damn it! Damn it! Pip eyed the tracks. Furious, he snatched up an oar and followed. Furious, he snatched up an oar and followed them, swearing vengeance on the thief. Sleet raked across his face as he tromped to the tree line, entered the windbreak, and took a breath. The ghostly pines were sheeted in white icing, making Pip think of old Wint's strawberry cakes. His stomach rumbled. A shadow loped through the trees, dark on white. It went on all fours, furry and rangy. Wolf! Wolf! Hesitating, Pip watched the creature drop something in the snow and savage it with a carnivorous growl. My ham! My ham! Enraged, Pip ran at it, rearing his oar. Branches smacked his face, snow exploded everywhere. The beast pelted off, running faster than the boy, and disappeared into the icy wind. Pip gave pursuit, falling farther and farther behind, his heart hammering as the snow pulled at his feet, trying to drag him down. Mine! Mine! Pip broke through the trees to find a wind-blown lake frozen beneath a sheet of black ice. Snow gusted across the surface in little whirlwinds, revealing the beast. It stood on the ice. It stood on the ice, quaking. A high keening sound escaped its ham-rimmed mouth. It was not a wolf. Tan fur lined its small body, decorated with a white blaze on its chest. An Akita dog. An Akita dog. Triangle-eared with a curly tail. It stared at him with mismatched eyes, one brown, one blue. On its flank, it wore the brand of the patient's man, a sheepdog. Pip strode forward, fear gone. "You rooked my ham, you bit!" His foot went through the ice. Stumbling, Pip's hands skidded on the surface as the Pip's hands skidded on the surface as the chill water bit his feet. He scrambled backward to the shore and watched a dark, wet crack. He scrambled backward to the shore and watched a dark, wet crack cut through the ice toward the dog. It whined and turned to flee, but the ice splintered and the dog went through. It yelped and swam for the surface, paws raking furiously at the ice. Trapped in a black crack within a world of white. Trapped in a black crack within a world of white. The Akita flailed at the ice and more pieces broke away. Pip watched it struggle and splash, but it refused to let the ham go. Soon it became clear the dog would not survive. Need to see this. Pip turned toward the forest. He heard the dog whine, terrified. Frowning, Pip stopped and gritted his teeth. He stepped into the water, extended his oar, and broke the ice. The Akita tried to paddle away from him, and only succeeded in making a bigger hole. Pip stepped further out onto the water and felt the cold tighten his gut, then his chest, then his neck. He extended the oar as far as he could, breaking the ice between him and the dog. It paddled for the oar, clawing at it. Pip drew it back to shore. Fangs bit the webbing of his thumb. The dog gnashed at him, and Pip stumbled onto shore, bleeding. The Akita snapped the ham out of the water and raced up the bank. Stupid. Pip cradled his bitten hand and watched the dog escape. It turned and stared at him triumphantly, then fled into the woods. The boy lurched through the trees back to his camp, freezing. He threw more ship timber into the coals and built a fire with shaking hands. Within minutes, the wreck of the Seagull was burning once again. Pip threw himself down near the fire, shivering. As he warmed, he rolled over and saw the Akita standing in the snow only a few feet away. A tan ghost with a ham in its mouth. Pip scowled. "No! You rooked my ham, you can't rook my fire! You rooked my ham, you can't rook my fire!" Pip threw sand at it. "No! No! Bad dog!" The Akita whimpered. "No! No!" yelled Pip. The dog hunkered down on its forelegs and belly crawled toward the fire. It kept coming, paw by paw, mismatched eyes pleading. Pip snatched the ham. The dog snarled, but only kept half. Covered in dog slobber and sand, pink meat hung limp in Pip's hand. He shoved the gobbet into the fire and let the meat cook. The Akita cowered on its belly and raised a paw to him, whimpering. The Akita the Akita cowered on its belly and raised a paw to him, whimpering. Pip saw its frozen fur, the icicles around its nostrils, heard its pleading heard its pleading whine, heard its pleading whine. He's as lonely as I am. He's as lonely as I am. Pip shrugged. Fine, you can come, Rooker. Fine, you can come, Rooker. It joined him. The dog walked nervously around the blaze thrice before it finally picked a warm spot on the far side and lay down. Pip smiled. Okay. He plucked the ham from the fire, brushed away the sand, and took a bite. He eyed the dog, its tan coat glowing orange in the firelight. As the wind howled, Pip stared at the animal, thinking of Bondi, of Kite, of Roper John. All things considered, the dog was better company. All things considered, the thieving dog was better company. All things considered, the thieving dog was better company. Pip watched the sunset and felt the night air go crisp and brittle. Snow fell, big white puffs that drifted from the sea and settled on his knees. He scooted closer to the fire and tucked the rest of the ham into the salt there. He scooted closer to the fire and tucked the rest of the ham into the salt barrel, making sure to seal it tight. When he woke, the Akita was nuzzled against his chest, sleeping like a baby. Despite the cold and sleet, the next few days were the best of Pip Weingrad's life. Despite the cold and sleet, the next few days were the best of Pip Weingrad's life. Together, the boy and his dog explored the vast white wilderness. Mysteries awaited beyond every shadow, every one a peril to be faced together. Every day an adventure, every hunt a victory, every meal a feast. The world was theirs. Fishing was easy. Pip's lines trapped 4 or 5 fish a day. They ate grayling and salmon for the first 10 days until they discovered a species of ptarmigan that roamed the island. The little bird's wings were no more useful than a chicken's, and they made for easy prey. Pip ran into a covey of birds. Pip ran into a covey of birds, waving his arms. Pip ran into a covey of birds, waving his arms and hollering. Ptarmigan scattered, waddling away from him and squawking. As they fled, Pip hollered, "Get him! Get him! Get him!" The Akita darted from his hiding place and snapped sharp teeth around a ptarmigan's neck. The covey fled into the woods and left their brother to his fate. Smiling, Pip walked toward the dog, hand out. The Akita growled, hanging on to the bird. "Rooker!" Pip yelled. "Give me that snow chicken!" "Rooker!" Pip yelled. "Give me that snow chicken! Give me that snow chicken!" The dog backed away, snarling. Pip threw up his hands and headed back toward camp. "Fine, you carry it." They raced each other down the beach. After eating the bird, they tussled in the sand, hollering and barking. When the moons came out, they howled at them together, a triumphant duet in the winter. When the moons came out, they howled at them together, a triumphant duet in the winter night. Within the month, the bodies began to stink. Even frozen corpses decay, and more arrived each day, washed ashore with the wreckage of the patient's man. Exploring the coast, they found a towering, cone shaped outcrop that jutted from the sea like a thumb. The boy eyed the peak 300 feet high. The boy eyed the peak 300 feet high. Good place for a signal fire. Throwing a stick for the dog to fetch, he investigated. Throwing a stick for the dog to fetch, he investigated the little mountain and considered the pooling eddies below. Good fishing spot, too. What do you think, boy? Is this our new home? Rooker barked, annoyed that he wasn't throwing the stick. Pip obliged him. When they returned to the camp, several bodies were missing. They had been dragged into the trees by large animals. Pip couldn't read sign well, but he saw the tracks. 2 or 3 of them. Long claws, dragging tails. Spells. All right, boy. He dusted snow off his pants. Let's get to work. Rooker was no help. The Akita barked and ran in circles around Pip while he hauled the remains of the seagull and the patient's man to their new camp, piece by piece. Pip christened the big rock Thimble Tower and set his fishing lines. Pine bow, bow. Pine boughs jammed between rocks made good poles, and his lines were sturdy. Their hooks baited with ptarmigan guts. After a long day, Pip slumped on his backside, exhausted. You're gonna have to carry your weight, Rooker. Toughen up. The Akita barked, agreeing. Pip assessed his new camp near Thimble Tower. He'd made more than a dozen trips, but he still didn't have half the gear. Gotta go back for more. That night was their last at the site of the wreck. Pip was plucking a ptarmigan when Rooker snarled and dashed off into the dark, barking. The boy snatched his oar and stared into the blackness, hollering for the dog. Rooker returned after a few minutes, his muzzle wet with blood. Pip patted him, thumping Rooker's side as the dog growled into the dark. In the morning, the rest of the bodies were gone. More tracks peppered the sand, the same as before. A dozen of them now. Not for the first time, Pip wished for a bow and arrow, or even a sword. He gripped his oar. Okay, Rooker, time to go. The Akita barked and spun in a circle, excited. Plenty of firewood surrounded Thimble Tower. Plenty of firewood surrounded Thimble Tower, but there was no way to get it to the top. The rocks were too steep. Pip knew he would only get one opportunity to signal a passing ship. So he dragged piles of firewood to both port and starboard side. So he dragged piles of firewood to both port and starboard sides of the little mountain. It took hours of hauling timber, but his wood was stacked, his tinder was dry, and flint and steel stood at the ready, just in case. Now, all we need is a ship and a kiss from Lady Luck. All right, that's much better than how things were going the other day. I think it was too late, and I was too tired and too distracted. Let's finish up this prologue. Cold and shivering, Pip rubbed Rooker's chin. Who's my lucky penny? Who's my lucky penny? You are. But Rooker barked, tongue hanging out the side of his mouth. Yes, you are. That night, Pip got his first look at an ice weasel. Low and long, as big as the dog, it slunk into the firelight as Pip ate dinner. Rooker was too distracted by his meal to notice until Pip shouted. The dog leapt to his feet and barked. The weasel fled out into the dark. Rooker tried to chase after it, but Pip grabbed the rope collar. Outside the firelight, he spotted several pairs of hungry eyes staring back at him. Rooker barked until they disappeared, and long after. They followed us. They followed us. In the morning, Pip suspended a hammock from the trees nearest Thimble Tower and hoisted all his food into the air. He added sharpened pongee sticks around the camp for protection, piled the campfire high, and stacked his wood deep. As the sun set, Rooker refused to get in the hammock until Pip. As the sun set, Rooker refused to get into the hammock. As the sun set, Rooker refused to get in the hammock until Pip picked him up and settled the dog on his chest. He patted the Akita's head and felt the dog's warmth against his body. Pip knew he would be dead without the dog. It wasn't just hunting game or guarding him while he slept. The Akita gave him something more. The dog gave him a reason to get. The dog gave him a reason to get up every morning when he woke to a frost-bitten wilderness. Every night he had a friend to keep loneliness at bay. For the first time since Jasper had sold him for 4 bags of grain, Pip Weingrad wasn't alone. Together, he and the dog had survived 28 nights on the frozen coast, better than most Together, he and the dog had survived 28 nights on the frozen coast, better than most grown men could have done. Pip stared at the fire, feeling his eyelids grow heavy. I can't hold out forever. But we can't hold out forever. He flashed awake when something bit his finger. He yelled and kicked the weasel out of his hammock. It plopped to the ground, scattering the dying fire, and skidded off to join 100 hungry eyes that It plopped to the ground, scattering the dying fire, and skittered off to join 100 hungry eyes that prowled the firelight. Rooker barked long into the night. Pip stroked his fur and watched the monsters in the shadows. Sooner or later, they're gonna win. Sooner or later, they're gonna win. Sooner or later, they're gonna win. The next morning, Pip searched Thimble Tower looking for a place to hide. The pack of weasels had lost its fear. Pip knew neither he nor the dog would survive another night. He explored the tower for crevices, but all were too damp to call home. Desperate, Pip climbed, hunting for any crack that might offer even scant protection, a hole they could defend. Come on, Rooker. Come on, Rooker. The dog was no good at climbing and decided to lend his support, but the dog was no good at climbing and decided to lend his support by barking at Pip from below. Pip scoured the rock but found nothing useful. They're gonna tear us apart. They're gonna tear us apart, Soon the dog's barking grew urgent. Giving up, giving up, Pip, giving up, Pip climbed down, worried the weasels were coming by daylight and the dog was trapped alone. He rounded the he rounded the final corner to discover Rooker was only yapping at a rock. Stupid dog. The Akita pawed at the base of the tower, head tilted to the side, barking. He looked like a puzzled child, and Pip couldn't help but laugh. He looked like a puzzled child, and Pip couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, yeah. What is it, boy? A crab? Rooker whined, his mismatched eyes locked on the stone. Pip pulled the dog away and spotted an opening under the rock. He got on his belly and peered up into a narrow tunnel lined with orange and purple starfish. A cave. Pip smiled. Pip smiled. Pip smiled. A cave we can block. He patted Rooker on the head and rubbed his neck. Who's my lucky penny? Rooker barked, happy to help. Rooker barked, happy to help. Pip crawled through the squishy starfish into the jagged tunnel, careful to avoid the sea anemones in the pools, not knowing if their spines were poisonous. He came around a bend and saw a low flicker of green light. Pip stopped. Some kind of glowy seaweed, maybe? Some kind of glowy seaweed, maybe? Some kind of glowy seaweed, maybe? The light moved, dancing, calling to him. Then it came around a corner toward him. A pixie. A pixie. A pixie. Pip had only glimpsed a few pixies, tiny green lanterns dancing through the late night forest. Will-o-wisps dancing in the air. There had been no pixies during his year at sea. Now one was just a few feet away. Glowing dragonfly wings fluttered faster than he could see, creating a green halo around it. He saw its feminine figure, legs, torso, arms, all in miniature. The pixie paused just long enough for Pip to see her face, her big eyes, her little smile, and then she was gone. And then she was gone. And then she was gone. Pip dragged himself through the tunnel after her. Come on, boy! Whining, Rooker crawled after him, his fur wet, eyes frightened. The tunnel grew wider, and somewhere in the dark, Pip heard the undulation of waves. The sound echoed against the rock, an orchestra of drum brushes, hissing, rolling, never-ending. The sea trapped within a stone concert hall. The sea trapped within a stone concert hall. Pip rounded the last corner to find Thimble Tower was hollow. The cavern was 100 feet tall and twice as wide. A vast pool of water, the air thick with pixies. It was as if the aurora borealis had taken up residence inside the little mountain, living and glowing and moving inside of it, a nest of a billion fireflies. It glowed, pulsing as swarms of pixies riffled the air in waves, spinning in lazy cyclones that filled the sea cave in twisting bands of light so thick he couldn't see through them. He laughed, watching them fly. Rooker barked, spinning in circles, mouth open in a big doggy smile. Rooker barked, spinning inside. Rooker barked, spinning in circles, mouth open in a big doggy smile. The boy stepped into the water and walked toward the lights, holding out his hands. Pixies danced before his eyes, slipping toward him and away again. They lighted on his fingers, then took off, giggling. As Pip walked, he saw their green reflections on the tranquil water. As Pip walked, he saw their green reflections on the tranquil water. He laughed and splashed water at them. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship he had ever seen. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain. The pixies parted. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship he had ever seen. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship. The pixies parted and drew back like a curtain to reveal the strangest ship he had ever seen. It's standing on the water. The catamaran was massive, 3 times the size of the Seagull, constructed in the shape of an upside-down Y. Its feet were gigantic outriggers twice as tall as a man, each attached to the curved legs that supported the bulk of the ship. Its feet were gigantic outriggers twice as tall as a man, each attached to curved legs that supported the bulk of the ship above the cove, like an enormous water strider. Like an enormous water strider. Like an enormous water strider. The thing nearly filled the sea cave. The thing nearly filled the sea cave, towering above the gentle waves like a mythic queen of legend. His mouth open, Pip stared at the ship and knew for the first time what true love felt like. What true love was. He dove into the cove and swam toward the ship. As he approached, he saw the wood was unlike anything he'd ever seen, embellished with dragons and griffins, snakes and hawks. He reached the massive outrigger and brushed the wood with his hand. A warm glow spread through his fingers as goose flesh rippled up his arm. His first touch of the wick was like a kiss from a long-lost lover. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. She's beautiful. Pip found a series of pegs on the side of the outrigger, a hidden ladder. Barking, Rooker splashed after him into the water. Come on, boy, let's get a look at her. Come on, boy, let's get a look at her. Come on, boy, let's get a look at her. He grabbed Rooker around the chest and climbed. Mounting the outrigger, the boy and his dog stared up at the underside of the hull. Pip grinned. I bet we can get up there. He slung the Akita over his shoulders and climbed up one of the ship's legs. Rooker whimpered, nervous, but Pip's balance was steady. He climbed the arch like a curved ladder until the footholds ended. The last stretch of the arc was flatter, but there was nothing to hold on to. So Pip grabbed the wood with his thighs and shimmied up inch by inch until he reached the deck rail. Lit by pixie light, the ship was covered in a layer of unbroken dust. If anyone had once trod her boards, it had been a long time ago. She was abandoned. Even so, Pip swore he felt something alive, almost like a heartbeat within the wood. Hello? 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 He shouted, waiting to be attacked by some horror within. None came. It's just us. Alone. Pip slid a leg over the rail and planted his feet on the deck. The ship rocked slightly, creaking, and seemed to come alive beneath. The ship rocked slightly, creaking, and seemed to come alive beneath him. He shouted, sending a flock of pixies to flight. She's ours! She's ours! She's ours! Pip laughed and danced around the deck, shouting at the top of his lungs. Rooker barked, trying to figure out what was happening. As pixies raced around the as pixies raced around as pixies raced around the masts above, driven to a joyous frenzy. Pip bent down and hugged Rooker's face, kissing him. You really are my lucky penny, ain't you, boy? You really are my lucky penny, ain't you, boy? Yeah, 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 barked the dog. Yeah. Thrilled, Pip ran to the deck wheel where captains piloted the ship. The wheel was bigger than he was, studded with smooth pins waiting for a pair of hands. Taking a breath, he took hold of the wheel. Captain Pip. The ship sighed around him, a wooden moan of pleasure. Pip giggled. He couldn't help himself. Laughter rolled out of him, shaking off the cold, the hunger, the worry of it all. Laughter rolled out of him, shaking off the cold, the hunger, the worry, it all unclasped from his mind, falling away in hysterics. He laughed like only a 10-year-old boy could, loud and long and free. He wrapped his arms around the deck wheel. Oh, I love you. Ding, ding. Ding, ding. If you could add a little sound effect there, that feels like metal clacking on the deck. Ding, ding. Not too much. Something fell onto the deck with a metallic sound. Pip looked down. At his feet, 2 brass rings gleamed in the dust. He glanced around, not understanding where they'd come from. Maybe they rolled off when I grabbed the wheel? He bent down and picked them up. The rings were warm to the touch and trembled with the wick. He slipped the rings on his middle finger and they fit perfectly. As if by magic. He held his hand up, watching the light of the pixies shimmer over the twin brass circles. He held his hand up, watching the light of the pixies shimmer over the He held his hand up, watching the light of the pixies shimmer over the twin brass circles. Like a pair of wedding rings. Like a pair of wedding rings. The ship shifted, sighing. Yes. 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 He heard her voice. He heard her voice. He could swear it. He heard her voice. He could swear it. The ship spoke to him, wanted him, longed for him. The ship spoke to him, wanted him, longed for him. And he knew in that moment he longed for her too. And he knew in that moment that he longed for her too. Pip nodded. Yes. Yes. On a peg nearby rested a big purple hat with a dusty peacock feather, a captain's hat. He plopped it on his head. We're captains now, Rooker. We're captains now, Rooker. We're captains now, Rooker. The dog spun in circles, barking happily as the ship sighed. The world better watch out for us, Pip hollered, his voice loud and powerful, echoing against the stone cavern. The world better watch out for us, Pip hollered, his voice loud and powerful, echoing against the stone cavern, pixies darting through the air above his ship, his dog, his world. You and me, boy! Pip grinned like a madman, his eyes bright and sharp. Pip grinned like a madman, his eyes bright and sharp. You and me! You and me! All right. That'll get us where we're going. And their chapter. All right, cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming along for the ride. We'll be back after a little bit. I got to go to Vegas and do a couple shoots. And again, I appreciate you having any interest in this story at all. It means a lot to me, and I hope it means plenty to you. We'll see you in a bit. Shabela.